Modernism started with the word modern. It first appeared in 1585 in the sense of present time or recent times. So the word modern is not so new. It appeared a long time ago and is the antithesis or the opposite of antiquity or traditional. So modern era is ironically associated with the European Enlightenment in the 18th century, around after 1870, and are expressed in the ideas of Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, and Hume. Yeah. So it is dated back to an era in the 18th. Oh, and I'm sorry, yeah. It happened. It first appeared in 1585, but it is associated with European Enlightenment in the 18th century, because it's exactly a movement that is um, that happened after the Enlightenment. Modernism happened after the Enlightenment. Um, Now, the Enlightenment is when the self, is the idea. It's a period that saw more advancement in science. Okay, and there are various ideas that followed or happened during this movement, um, and were upheld by people who supported the Enlightenment. And the first is the self is stable, coherent, rational. It knows the world through reason. These are the beliefs in the Enlightenment era. The mode of knowing produced by science is produced by the self is science. Knowledge or truth produced by the science will lead towards progress. Reason is the ultimate judge of what is true, the good, and the right. Science is the paradigm for all types of knowledge, and those who produce scientific knowledge are not motivated by other concerns such as power and knowledge. Language or other modes of expressions used in producing or disseminating knowledge must also be rational, firm and objective connection between signifier and signified. So during this era, science and reason were taught to rule mankind. That reason is the ultimate judge of what is true, the good and the right. That we human beings have to rely on reason, yeah, or rely on reason to understand this world, and we don't use our emotion to understand this world. We use our reason, and science is born out of this use of reason, and it is not misused by anyone who wants more power, okay, and so on. Science is completely something that is produced by scientific knowledge, and the scientist is not motivated by desire for power and so on. So modernity follows its Enlightenment period, Enlightenment project. It began in the 18th century. Modernity is fundamentally about order, about rationality and rationalization, creating order out of chaos. So it's also historically connected to the creation of many new inventions, because in the Enlightenment saw more emphasis being put on science. So the period following the Enlightenment period produced many people who could create things, invent things. Modernity exists in a post-industrial context. It is everything that generally can be seen as modern, and therefore exists as a historical period informed by all those before it. So it stands as an era of social relations, most commonly associated with capitalism and a new global awareness. So you have during the modernity period, you know, everything that can be what do you call that, called modern, such as television, telephone, and so forth, were being created during this period, and it was the period from the 18th to 19th century, and you know that many things like um, what do you call that, cars, for example, or airplanes, were being created by the Wright brothers during this period. So this period saw a lot of inventions. Um, And it's also brought about capitalism because most of this invention needed to be sold to people. So capitalism grew in this period, and a new global awareness because when television was invented, we could see what was happening in many places that are far away from our homes. So we could also call people using telephones. We can make calls to um, Britain, from Malaya, and so on. So it was a period characterized by many new inventions. Um, Yet from the 1870s onwards, the idea that history and civilization were inherently progressive and progress was always good came under increasing attack. There was the detrimental effects of the Industrial Revolution because from 1870 onwards, during the 19th century, the idea that mankind was progressing because of these inventions became questionable because of Marx's alienation of capitalist workers. Karl Marx was looking at factories that were being built during that time, no? And he saw that many of the factory workers were poor and they were paid very little and they had to live in very horrible conditions. No? They didn't have enough to eat. So the idea that progress itself, because of what Marx saw, and he wrote about what he saw to other people. Yeah, he told other people what was happening in the factories and so on. So because of him and because of um, other people like Charles Darwin, who wrote the theory of evolution, said Charles Darwin said that mankind came from monkeys. Okay, but he also said that mankind can become degenerate. They can become worse. It does not mean that his theory of evolution does not mean that mankind will continue to progress. Mankind can also digress. They can become, they can if they cannot live in the current climatic situation, no? If they keep on smelling smoke and they keep living in very polluted areas, they will become like monkeys again. Okay, so they can become degenerates. Okay, so because of Marx and because of Charles Darwin, the idea that mankind was progressing became questionable because how come life was worse when so many new inventions were being created? So the idea that mankind was progressing was being questioned. Um, so in the 1880s, a strand of thinking began to assert that it was necessary to push aside previous norms entirely instead of merely revising past knowledge in light of contemporary techniques. Um, So in 1980s, people began to question whether they were progressing, and then because the Enlightenment taught that people were progressing continuously, so they questioned the past, they questioned the Enlightenment period, they questioned everything from the past because they said that no, we are not progressing. Yeah? So modernist art began to appear. Now, they know that they're not progressing, but they have to find a way in which they can see themselves progressing, becoming better, and they cannot accept science anymore because they saw that scientific findings, and so on, was not really bringing progress. It was bringing more destruction. Okay, so one field in which they found progress was in the field of art. Uh, the arts, for example, painting, for example, provided a form of progress because it did not it was the opposite of science. It did not rely on science. Okay, so it relied on humanities, on feelings, on people. So art began to be viewed as something that was progressing, that could bring progress. So new techniques in art brought about progress, the idea of progress. So Everdale dates its first appearance to the years between 1885 to 1886 with George Surratt's pointillism. It's just and a technique that he uses, which use a lot of dots. And the painting A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte was produced from this idea of using dots. And later, and not so locally, modernism appeared in music, architecture, and literature. So avant-garde, a term used for the first time to describe literary movement. So the first time avant-garde was used. I always keep mistaking this when I was an undergrad. I would say it's avant-garde. So actually, it's not. It's avant-garde. So something new. Avant-garde represents is a word that derives is derived from the word vanguardism. So vanguard, to be at the vanguard of something is to be at the edge of something new. So this is a painting by Georges Seurat, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. It's using dots. And in a similar technique, we have paintings nowadays, photos that are produced using other photos. Now, the growing movement in art parallel developments in physics, such as Einstein's special theory of relativity, innovations in industry, and increased role of the social sciences in public policy. Freud's psychoanalytical theory also showed that man was governed not by his rational side, but something in his unconscious mind. So, what was happening during this art movement um, happened in many other fields. Einstein started to question the idea of whether we all view time in the same way, for example, or even length, width, and height. He questioned these four things: time, length, width, and height. And he said that they were relative, meaning that they could be different for different people or different for different species. For example, if a man were to land on Mars, his day would be longer because it takes a longer time for Mars to circulate around the sun. Okay, his days would be longer than a day on Earth. So he said that time is actually very relative. It's not the same for everyone. And for example, length, how big we are is very relative to what to our size. If you were a kid, a small room might appear big, but to an adult, a small room will appear small, and so on. So these were the beginning of a series of intense questioning into the nature of reality, and if previous restrictions, namely religious and scientific authorities, which had been in place around human activity, were dissolving, then art too would have to radically change. So this brought about new ideas: the idea of relativity, the idea of uh, psychoanalysis. They brought about new ideas about how to create art, and thus came in the early 20th century the idea of time modernism. Thus, in the first 20 years of the 20th century, many writers and thinkers and artists broke with traditional means of organizing literature, painting, and music. The result were abstract art, atonal music, stream of consciousness technique, and so on. So, modernism as an artistic and cultural movement operated within the context of the rejection of realism and rejection of development of concrete values. So, realism is what we see around us, but the people during this era, in the first 20 years of the 20th century, they said that realism is no longer true because we are being ruled by our unconscious. There are things that we cannot see around us, and we need to convey this in our paintings. And they also rejected concrete values because they no longer believe in God. Also, in the 20th century was a period that rejected God. And why do they reject God? Huh? Okay, we will answer this question later, but let's see the paintings that were being created during this era. And now Pablo Picasso became a famous painter. He produced paintings that uses multiple perspectives, different ways of looking at things. Um, and this produced a painting called um, the Weeping Woman from a technique that he created, which is Cubist art. Cubism. Cubism is simply looking at certain things from various angles and putting all those angles in one painting. So it doesn't look realistic, the painting, but it represents how we view things. Um, and then modernist sculptures were created, and this is urinal, a urinal where you urinate, men urinate into this urinal. But according to the modernists, this is high art. Urinals can be a piece of artistic, what do you call that, sculpture. It could be valued for its beauty rather than its use only. Okay, so and then Piet Mondrian, he drew um, the word the what do you call that, the number 10. You see, he drew this number 10 and it's painting, and he positions many number 10 inside this painting, and it becomes a minimalist art. Okay, so these are the works of artists. So these developments began to give a new meaning to what is termed modernism. It approved disruption, rejecting or moving beyond simple realism in literature and art, and rejecting or dramatically altering tonality in music. There is also a tonal music, which sounds very strange. You can go to YouTube and can see it. Yeah? Now, modernism was still progressive, increasingly saw traditional forms and traditional social arrangements as hindering progress, and therefore recast the artist as a revolutionary, overthrowing rather than enlightening. So, modernism, um, while still progressive, um, it was getting rid of tradition, because it no longer believe in the ideas that we are progressing. They no longer believe in the Enlightenment period, so it wanted something new. Modernism was an artistic movement. So this artistic movement wanted something new, and earlier I had said that it also involved the rejection of God. Now, and human values in the sense. Why? Because why was God rejected and why was human values rejected? Because of what happened during the World War. And early 20th century saw two wars. Yeah. Now, the first war, um, before and after the first war, modernism was very popular. Now, the war had an impact on the way modernism became popular, because a lot of people died during the war, and then they were questioning. These people were dying because they were machine guns being used to kill them. Machine guns that are that can really kill people. That became weapons of mass destruction. Bombs. A lot of bombs were being created during this period, and then people also created aeroplanes so that they were used to kill people. They used to be wars. Um, there used to be pilots who could use guns to kill other pilots. So men were ruled by the desire. So people were saying, where is God in all of this? Why did God allow people to kill each other? Yeah, and so on. So they became disillusioned. They became less religious. So they saw that men were ruled by their desire to dominate regardless of the cause. And then the birth of the machine age also changed the conditions of life. Machine warfare became a touchstone of the ultimate reality. The view that mankind was making slow and steady moral progress seemed ridiculous in the face of the senseless slaughter. So we were not progressing also as because of the war, because people were being killed. Many people died during the war, the First World War. And some of the modernist writers and artists from America and Europe appeared. Ezra Pound was a poet. He produced something called Imagism. Virginia Woolf, who was a feminist theorist. Bertolt Brecht wrote Alienation Effect, which is a new way of staging dramas. Pablo Picasso with his Cubism, William Faulkner, and so many others. So modernist literature tend to follow these trends. The first is that this is the trends in modernist literature. Now, modernism is more like not just it's not a way of reading a text. Huh? Like in previous theories, we were looking at ways of reading text, but in modernism, the what they call that the way to read a modernist work is to see or the way to read a work from the modernist point of view is to find a work that fits into this idea of modernism. Maybe the author had modernist tendencies, huh? So he drew a work based on modernism. So you're not going to say that you're not going to look at a work that is post-modernist or maybe a work that is feminist and say that it is modernist. No. So modernism needs it is a work on its own. Um, so an emphasis on impressionism and subjectivity that is on how we see rather than what we see. So a preoccupation evident in the use of streams of consciousness technique. So for of one way to write in a modernist way is to use the stream of consciousness technique, and this stream of consciousness is merely to write according to your consciousness, to your awareness. So it's just simply a sentence that this one doesn't even stop anywhere except for the last line. So a quarter after which, what an unearthly hour, I suppose they're just getting up in China and now combing out their pigtails. So suddenly China is being referred to here, yeah, alluded to here, and then combing out their pigtails for the day we will soon have the nuns ringing. And suddenly the nuns, okay, are thought or comes into the consciousness, and the fact that they will ring the doorbell suddenly becomes um, suddenly appears there. Okay, so you have so many things going on in the mind of the narrator, and the narrator is simply putting all these things into one paragraph. So this is the stream of consciousness technique. So a movement in novels away from the apparent objectivity provided by such features such as omniscient external narration, fixed narrative points of view, and clear-cut moral positions. So there is a move away from external narration, fixed narrative points of view, and so on. Um, Previously, we have narrators who knew everything about the story, yeah? But in in this modernist technique, we have narrators who are unreliable, who know only a bit about the story. So he tells the story from his point of view, and it won't tell the whole story because the narrator does not know everything. So also many narrators and the moral position is sometimes unclear. There could be many narrators telling the same story, like in Faulkner's novels, or there could be moral positions that are sometimes unclear. When we go to Plato seems to have a very good idea that certain stories have good morals, certain stories have bad morals. But in modernist novels, for example, the ending can be open-ended. You cannot say that the main character is someone who is evil or good, because you don't know the reason really why he done something like kill someone. So it becomes unclear. The moral reason for the action becomes unclear. So then, in number three, a blurring of distinctions between genre, so that novels tend to become more lyrical and poetic, for instance, and poems more documentary and prose-like. So a novel can actually become like a poem. It can be written like a poem, like in A Suitable Boy. A Suitable Boy is a novel by Vikram Seth, but if you look at through the pages, it looks like a poem, a book of poems. So and then a new liking for the fragmented forms, discontinuous narratives, and random seeming collages of disparate materials. So it's a collage, it's like a painting. A poem can appear like a painting, like a collage, which is made up of so many things. And this is a painting, and this is a poem which has lines coming from words perhaps that different people say. Am I to understand? And understand what? Huh? Where's McNally? Where's Rand? suddenly calls out to different people, and asking them about these people. However, many grant, let's give a great big hand. Am I to understand? Okay. So it is not really conclusive. What does it mean? So this is the problem with modernist work. Sometimes it escapes meaning. Yeah, it plays around with language. It escapes meaning. A tendency towards reflexivity or self-consciousness about the production of the work of art, so that each piece calls attention to its own status as a production, as something constructed. So, Six Characters in the Search of an Artist by Luigi Pirandello starts off with an acting company preparing to rehearse the play, Mixing It Up by Luigi Pirandello. And then suddenly there appears to be six people who come to the stage and they are looking for the director. Yeah. And then the director of the play is furious at the interruption and demands an explanation. And they say, the characters say that they are unfinished characters in search of an author to find their story. Okay. So this is, or to finish that story. So this is the, no, it's showing you a play within a play in that sense. It's showing that a play is also something that is constructed, that is made up. It does not represent reality. It's something that is made up. So another characteristic of modernism is that there is a rejection of elaborate formal aesthetics in favor of minimalist designs, and a rejection of, in a large part, of formal aesthetic theories in favor of spontaneity and discovery in text. So there is a movement towards minimalism, and also reject spontaneity and discovery in text. So we have something like this. Minimalist is a major what do you call that, characteristic of modernism. So see here, in a station of the metro, okay, so the apparition of these faces in the crowd petals on a wet black bow. And this is the just two lines. This poem has only two lines. So it is minimalist in that sense. And what does it mean actually? The apparition of these faces in the crowd petals on a wet black bow. It doesn't mean anything. It's just that, it's something that the writer can see from faces that he sees waiting, faces of people who are waiting for the LRT to appear, and he sees them like petals, things that they look like petals on a wet black bow. So then we have another what do you call it, characteristics of modernism, which is a rejection of distinction between high and low, um, or pop culture, both in choice of materials used to produce art, such as the urinal, and in methods of displaying and distribution as something constructed. Okay. Now you see, one example is rap lyrics. To the modernists, rap lyrics can also be a form of poetry. So, but then there was a shift from modernism to postmodernism. Okay, so I will end now because that basically covers modernism. So anyone want to ask me anything? Anyone want to ask me anything? Do you understand what went on just now? Yeah, when you go to art museum, you see the strange looking paintings, right? Um, Paintings that sometimes, have you seen a painting that is simply like a minimalist painting? You see that, oh, I can draw that. My grandmother can draw that even better than that person. Okay, so this is modernist art. Now, when they were created, when you can try drawing for your home also, modernist art. That's what my previous classes, when we had a normal classes, some of the students created a video of them uh, drawing specific modernist arts, okay, which are like, what you have seen is can be chincai bochai work of art, and then they will ask, what does it mean? What does it mean? Can you see a dog inside this? Can you see a lion inside this? And so they're making fun of it, So it was fun. And another set actually came up with the video of um, creating pictures. They took a picture of themselves that they use app that can find on art. They can change the way the picture looks like. Okay, so that was modernist art also. Um, so things like that. And then one group also, they look at different ways of transformations in the way people used to live. Like for example, before in the traditional era, what did people do? What did they like to eat? And then suddenly, in the modern era, they eat something else. So it can be like that also. It doesn't have to be strictly on modernism. It can be on the time, traditional and versus modern time. So we have that. So it was kind of fun. But you can work on that for your blog and for your video. It can be on that, things like that. But you can use Google Meet. You can use Google Meet. You can discuss with each other on Google Meet, right? You can produce that video. It's so simple. So I think it's simple anyway. Huh? But if you have any difficulty, you can ask me. So now when we go to postmodernism in our next lesson, it's basically the same thing. It's very similar, but it's more on consumerism. Postmodernism is more on consumerism, and also, but the technique sometimes can be similar. Minimalist. It can be um, removing the distinction between low and high art. Nah? Um, Not so long ago, I heard that one painter, one sculpturist, she cut her nails, cut her nails, and then took some of her hair, cut her hair, then put on a piece of paper, and maybe like make something artistic out of it, and then put it inside the case, and then gave it to a museum to show that this is a part of modernist art. So people were viewing her nails and her hair, on show. That's it. Uh, Nowadays, you can see also people collecting rubbish, like Lucy Liu, the actor, right? US actor. She took garbage, some pieces of garbage, and then rearranged it into art. So her work uh, were displayed a few years ago, I think, in Singapore. Yeah, so it was kind of like garbage art, recycling garbage so that it can appear to be art. So this is modernism as well. So what was the distinction in literature, at least? In literature, what was the distinction between postmodernists and modernists? So modernists in literature, sometimes we see postmodernists and modernists, they look the same thing. In art, for example, they look the same, but uh, in architecture they look different, because in different fields there are different interpretations of modernism and postmodernism. In architecture, modernist buildings are normally box like what we can see in PPR, PPRK, perumahan murah, or rendah, right? Cost rendah. You see that they are mostly box-like. Now, this is created by modernism. When a long time ago in 1980s and so on, all the flats were created like boxes. Okay, but nowadays you find buildings that are like what do you call that? Like tabung haji that is like what do you call that? Cylinder, cylinder like buildings. Now it looks very new when it appeared in around 1990, or maybe slightly earlier than that. It looks very new, and it looks strange, um, and it looks fun also because it looks like a tabung. Huh? Okay, so this is a postmodernist. It plays around. It is plays around with the idea of fun. No? It is it brings fun out of um, it makes us feel happy. Huh? It celebrates the idea of fun. Okay, and you can see KLCC building also like two bullets. Okay, so that is another element of fun. So this is the main difference between modernism and postmodernism in architecture. Modernist buildings are like boxes, but postmodernist buildings are making fun of, or it brings up the idea of fun. It elicits happiness in people when they view it, because there is an element of fun in it. So this is postmodernist. Now, what happens to literature? Because literature, we have all those classification ways of writing literature, um, and they are shared with postmodernists. Postmodernists also have similar ways, but in postmodernist literature, there is more fun. It makes fun of subjects in novels, for example, of characters. We have black humor. We have irony. Okay, so all of this postmodernist novel is more fun. It has more humor in it than modernist work. Modernist works are depressing. They're a bit depressing. Um, they're a bit bleak. You know? Okay, for example, movies. For example, yesterday, somebody from another section, they said, she asked me, one person asked me, is Maze Runner a more postmodernist novel? Postmodernist, it's a novel and also a film. So, is Maze Runner postmodernist or modernist? And I said it's modernist because you see the ambience, the what do you call that? The message that comes across is quite bleak. It's quite except for the ending. It's quite it's a bit sad. It's a sad not story, but you see, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is a happy story. It is. It's also postmodernist in the way. You can see Forrest Gump is a bit changed, right? There is a character called Forrest Gump who lived in who had lived in 1950s, supposedly a real character because he had met the president who could run. But it's funny. It's funny, but there are sad incidences, but it's not ruled by the sadness. It's just fun. It is humorous. Okay, so do you have any question to ask me? What the? Uh, so you can no question at all. Do you understand the concept of modernism and postmodernism? Yeah, there is basically very little difference between the two, but modernist work are more bleak because there was also rejection of God. When modernists appeared, the artists and other people who believed in this, who lived during this period, who believed in the idea of modernism, they were sad because although there were many technological advancement, but there was no progress. People were being killed and so on. And they were sad also because they have lost God. They don't believe in God anymore. They have rejected him because of Darwin, because of Karl Marx. They rejected God. And then they felt sad about this, the rejection of God. It's like losing knowledge of Santa Claus. They, you know, in the West, they believe that there's a person called Santa Claus who gives presents during Christmas, but suddenly somebody tells them there is no Santa Claus, so they feel sad. They feel sad that there's no more Santa Claus, but they cannot bring themselves to believe that Santa Claus exists anymore. So it's like that with God. Okay. Okay. So this is the thing. Yeah. Anyone has any question for me? For if you have any question, you can ask me. No. Okay, so we live right now in the postmodernist era, but some people say that we live beyond that. Okay, but we are, I see in Malaysia we live in that era, postmodernism. But there are many modernist buildings around. There are many modernist work around. There are many realistic work. Realism is also alive. Everything exists together, but the predominant what they call that predominant theory is on postmodernism. Okay, so if you have no more questions, I'll say goodbye to you. Hope you. I'm looking forward to the blog and to the video as well. Okay, make it fun, make it new. It's a dish, a saying in modernism. Make it new. Okay, so you make yourself new also by making a video, maybe perhaps using Google Meet, right? Okay, so that's something new. Okay, so I'll see you again. Huh? Okay, bye. Nobody want to ask any question, huh? If you want, you can ask me. Okay, so goodbye to you.